Hello, everyone, and welcome to Esri Press Interviews. I'm Stacy Krieg, and I'm an acquisitions editor at Esri Press. And today we have Dr. Paul Zandbergen. He is the author of two of our newest books, Python Scripting for ArcGIS Pro and Advanced Python Scripting for ArcGIS Pro. And Paul, thank you for joining us. We're so happy to have you here.
Yes, Stacy, it's good to talk to you.
So Dr. Paul Zandbergen is a professor at the GIS program in Vancouver Island University in British Columbia, Canada. His teaching includes courses on introductory GIS, spatial analysis and modeling, spatial statistics, and GIS programming. And he's published over 50 journals, articles, and book chapters.
Thank you, Stacy, for that introduction. In addition to my current position in the GIS program at Vancouver Island University, I've also taught at 10 different universities across Canada and the US. So I've been fortunate enough to have had a lot of experience with different GIS programs across North America. And I did a tally recently, and I've taught over 1,000 students in GIS programming. I didn't realize it was that many.
Wow.
So one thing a lot of students have told me is that they think Python programming and programming in general is difficult. There is this idea that it's something that is challenging, that it's not for them. And so there is this sort of feeling that programming requires a special talent, just like maybe math or a foreign language. And I don't believe that. I think anyone who has learned some GIS can also learn some programming to become better at GIS. So I don't think it requires a special talent. It requires time. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it is a skill you can learn. So perhaps before you fire off some of your questions, I'd like to say a few things about why I think readers may want to spend some time learning programming to begin with.
That's a great
So I told you it's a skill you can learn, but why would you want to learn it? So the number one thing I think is that in many GIS workflows, programming will help save you time. Not only can you do more, you can often do it more efficiently. So if you are a GIS technician or analyst and you find yourself doing some of the same repetitive tasks like downloading data, copying it, making maps, doing some geoprocessing, and you repeat those steps very frequently, programming will save you time. So the time you invest in learning it will pay off in the long run. The second, yes, and the second reason I think why readers may want to learn programming is because it'll create better career opportunities for you. Even introductory or intermediate GIS technician or analyst positions will require some programming. It's becoming an increasingly sought after skill, not just for full-time developers, but for regular GIS folk whose primary job isn't programming, but they're kind of expected to do some of it, or at least communicate with a development team. And so you develop some of the language and some of the skills that requires interaction with perhaps full-time developers. And I think thirdly, programming is a way of thinking. And so it helps you become a better problem solver. Of course, we cannot solve all our problems in GIS with just programming, but it does provide a meaningful framework to think about accuracy, repeatability, continuity, efficiency, and programming plays a large role in that. So it can save you time, it can help your career, and I think you become a better problem solver. So learning programming creates lots of new opportunities for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for going over that. I think that's one of the questions that we hear a lot is what can learning Python do for you? So those are really three really important parts of programming. So thank you. We did have a lot of questions, actually. Your book is super popular, and we had some questions from our readers through Geonet. So if you don't mind, we can get into those.
Please, fire away.
So the first question is, what drew you personally into GIS? Which is interesting.
Yeah. So I've been doing JS for a long time, more than
Mhm.
25 years, but I don't have a degree in geography or GIS. Like many JS professionals my age, there weren't all that many university programs. The software wasn't very widely used. So
Mhm.
I was actually doing a degree in resource management, and my research required uh, that we used JS software to answer specific questions. So it was
Mhm.
very much driven by a need to accomplish a task, and it appeared that only JS was able to do it. And so at the time, I was working on watersheds and pollution, runoff modeling, and JS was the natural approach to solve that particular question. And I think that's what drew me to GIS over the years. It's, I find programming and algorithms interesting, but I think what really keeps me going in GIS is that it can be used for so many different types of problems. It's a natural fit for many types of questions. It's a way of looking at a problem and solving it,
Mhm.
uh, which may not always require programming. It's just the JS framework allows us to do lots of different types of analyses. And I continue to be amazed by all my graduate students who find new ways to apply GIS to problems I hadn't thought of. And
Mhm.
so it continues to sort of inspire me and keeps my job interesting.
And what got you interested in using Python and GIS together?
Yeah, so I've been programming since my early days of college, but
Mhm.
Python wasn't actually used at the time. I used Pascal and Fortran, and I thought it was interesting, but I didn't really see a need for me to use it immediately.
Mhm.
But then when I started doing GIS, I quickly found that every time I wanted to do something, the software hadn't quite caught up yet, and you had to customize the software. But it was a little clumsy. You had to learn Avenue or AML and later Visual Basic for applications. And and I could see that these languages would not stand the test of time. They served their purpose, but they weren't going to be around very long. So I didn't think I should be teaching my students how to use those specific languages. But then about 15 years ago, Esri chose Python as a scripting language for the ArcGIS platform. And that's the first time I realized this is something I can teach because Python is widely used. It will be around. At least that was my take on it.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of resources to use it, and it can be used for many other things. So now is a good time to start teaching programming because the specific language you're learning has utility beyond the software of today and will be around for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And that has turned out to be the case. Python has only become more important since then.
Did you always see teaching in your future, or did you ever imagine yourself in a different career?
Well, I've always been drawn to academia and teaching, but in college, actually, my first job was as a journalist. Uh, I wrote articles for the newspaper. I was a photographer as well, and I thought that was going to be my future. So
Mm-hmm.
I paid my way through college, writing and taking pictures, and I thought that was going to be my career. But it turned out to be a very unstable career. It wasn't very reliable for me. So I decided to go back to school and get a doctorate and get into teaching and research. But fortunately, in my efforts to write a book, I've been able to also put my creativity back to work. So I do feel it's come a little bit full circle. I thought I was going to be a writer, but I had to become a professor first. So I had a platform and a stable job and a sounding board. The hundreds of students over the years have helped me with my writing. So I have a captive audience when I teach a course, but it's great to have the ability to, the opportunity to write a book, which will sort of expand the the normal range of students that I could reach.
So here's a question about the book that you've written. What is the
Yeah.
difference in the audiences between the Python scripting for ArcGIS Pro and the advanced Python scripting for ArcGIS Pro?
Yeah, so the first book is really designed as a introductory text that does not require any prior Python knowledge or any programming knowledge for that matter. Readers are expected to know ArcGIS Pro quite well, but no prior coding experience. And the book walks students through why you would write code, where you write it, and then how to use Python scripting to expand the functionality of the software, step by step. No prior coding knowledge, and it walks you through the fundamentals of Python, but also how to use ArcPy, which is the Python package that makes it possible to use Python with ArcGIS Pro. And by the end of the first book, readers will be able to write relatively sort of intermediate level scripts for their own use to automate tasks, geoprocessing tasks, data management tasks, the most fundamental of GIS operations. The second book picks off where the first left off and focuses more on more complex scripts, but also how to turn Python scripts into tools to be used for others. So typically the first stage of learning Python is to make it work for you. And the second stage is how to write tools that others can use. So one of the nice things about Python is that you can build a tool from your Python code that others can use who don't actually know Python themselves. So you write tools for other people's workflows. The second book also covers more additional packages. So in addition to ArcPy, Python gives access to thousands of other packages, which can expand the range of things you can do with your Python script.
Okay, thank you. That was really a clear explanation. I think that'll help our readers when they're looking for which book to purchase. So we have a question from an educator. This person has a little Python experience and is willing to learn more to teach it effectively. So can you let them know if the book is suitable for teaching newbies like themselves? And I think you kind of answered that question, but it sounds like they're asking if these books are appropriate for new teachers and new students.
Yes, definitely. So the first book is really designed for those without any prior coding experience, and it provides a gentle introduction. So it kind of holds your hand and walks you through the fundamentals of why to write code, where to write it within the ArcGIS platform. And it includes a significant chapter on Python fundamentals. So if you've never seen Python code, you can obviously acquire other textbooks or online resources. There's many good other books, but the book has a built-in chapter on the fundamentals of Python, focused on the things you need to apply it to ArcGIS. So if you have no prior Python experience as an instructor, I empathize with you, because when I started teaching, there were very few resources that were specific to Python and GIS. So in a way, I've written the book that I would like to have had when I started teaching it. So it's definitely designed for teaching. The structure of the chapters, the content, the flow, review questions at the end, a list of key terms are all provided to help an instructor organize their teaching. There's also a set of exercises. So each chapter comes with an exercise that repeats some of the same concepts with hands-on code. And it gives very specific instructions on what to type where, making sure that you can run the code that is in the book. So I think that'll help instructors to ease into teaching the course, but obviously, completing the material themselves. And the exercises will greatly speed up the process of providing lab assignments to the students. In my own teaching, I create a lab assignment, but they're expected to complete the exercises first so they know how to get started.
Good. Yeah, I know the exercises are a really great resource, and a lot of people have used them in the past for the previous book. So thanks for reminding us that they're out there and they will be available for anyone who picks up the book. So here's another question about education. How can educators better equip their students with the right tools and techniques when it comes to programming and GIS?
Yeah, so I have a couple of suggestions. One obviously is to use good materials, including my books, but there are several other good resources as well. And that includes resources that encourage best practices. So Python itself has a set of documents which are explained a couple times in the book that help students write code that others can read. There is a common saying in Python is that a piece of code is read a few times by those who write it, but many more times by those who read it. So one of the things educators can do is to help students write what I call readable code. So that includes things how you call things like your variables and your files, comments that you provide, but also how you organize the code. So there's some good resources, including in the books themselves, on how to follow best practices to make your code not just logical and correct, but also readable by others. The second thing I think educators can do is to help students navigate through all the other online documentation. There is very extensive documentation for ArcGIS Pro itself. There's good documentation on the ArcPy package and other packages. Python itself has extensive documentation, and so that can be a little overwhelming. And so it's very helpful for educators to help students navigate how to use that documentation and when to use it. One thing I often discourage students is to simply try to Google everything and hope you land on a good resource page. There's so much information that it really helps to navigate some of the key resources. And so a third thing I'd like to add is that there are some very specific community forums that students should become familiar with. If you have a question, then that's probably the best next place to go to after you've asked your instructor or coworker. And those include Esri's Geonet community, and there are separate sections on geoprocessing and Python and other programming languages. And there's also the Stack Exchange, which is very widely used by developers, and they have a separate GIS community as well. And so most of the questions you have probably been asked before. And so those are two very good community-based resources where both educators and students can get some of their questions answered.
Thank you. So our next question is, what advice would you have for someone who's just getting started with Python?
Yeah, so the first advice I have is to take a deep breath and to say to yourself, I can do this. I can learn Python. I can learn coding. It is not a special talent. It is a skill you can learn. It's a little bit like learning other skills, like a foreign language or creative writing. And so it requires that you have good resources, and the books can help with that, but there's many other online resources as well. It's also helpful to find what I would call a mentor, someone who is a little bit ahead of you in terms of their skill and knowledge. It can be an instructor, obviously, if you're taking a course at a university. But it can also be a coworker or someone from your social circle or someone that you know professionally. And they could become sort of a mentor for you to get some guidance as to what skills to learn. I wouldn't run to your mentor with every single coding question because many of those can be answered using the online communities and the materials that are online. But a mentor can help you figure out what skills to learn, where to focus your time, because you do want to feel confident that the time you're investing is into skills that are going to pay off. As a small example, we have two versions of Python, And initially, it can be confusing which one you should learn. And that's not a difficult question to answer. You ask anyone in the Python community, and they'll tell you, don't learn Python 2, learn Python 3. And the book is entirely Python 3. But if you're just getting started, even those basic things about where to invest your time can be a little daunting. And so someone who can be a mentor to you for some of these bigger questions, I think, can be very helpful. You can also get some career advice as to what kind of skills will help you move into a certain type of position. What are the trends in the software world that you need to be aware of? And so I think that having a mentor will help students. And I think it also helps to be part of a community. So that could be the students in your class if you're taking a course. It could be some of your coworkers who are learning the same skills. But it could also be members of one of the online communities that we've mentioned, which tend to be very supportive. I think if anything, the Python community is very supportive of people learning Python, promoting Python as a way to think about a problem, without being closed-minded about other solutions. A lot of Python developers learn other languages as well. So it doesn't always have to be one way. And I think the Python community is very open-minded about the strengths and limitations of a particular approach and to help other users further their skills.
Okay, so if you had one thing that you wanted readers to take away from reading these books, what would that be?
Yeah, so the one thing I think that stands out to me is that readers of the book should start with the right mindset, which I think should be saying to yourself, I can learn this. I can learn how to code. No matter your level of experience, no matter your preconceived thoughts as to what coding is, take a deep breath, put your hand on the book and saying, I can learn this. And then you start going to chapter 1 and chapter 2 and gradually work your way through it. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's also not beyond the realm of possibility. If you can learn GIS, you can learn Python. Maybe a second thing I'll add, because it's not only just one thing, I think students will find that programming is a bit of a different way of thinking. If you've never written code before, it can look a little intimidating, but once you get used to it, you can start seeing the patterns, you can start seeing some of its logic, and dare I say, some of its beauty. There is a very famous set of guidelines called the Zen of Python. And everyone learning Python will end up reading those at some point. They're referred to in the book as well. And essentially, it comes down to recognizing that coding, like any other activity, can be a form of creative expression. So it may look very technical and full of rules and algorithms. And so, yes, we need those rules for the code to work. But within those rules, it can be a creative expression, similar to other endeavors like learning how to paint or speaking a foreign language or playing music. And I think the analogies are that it appears somewhat difficult if you're just getting started, but learning the basics isn't that difficult. And yes, to become really good at it, it requires diligent practice. But it's only a little bit of talent and a lot of practice, like many other endeavors. So if you have had some doubts in the past about whether you should learn how to code, my answer is yes, you should learn how to code. Give it a try. Not to say that you're going to become a full-time Python developer immediately, but maybe you will. There are a lot of people that have taken on coding as a second or even third career, and it can be very rewarding. So I hope the books will benefit you and you'll give coding a close look, and hopefully it'll benefit you personally as well as in your career.
Well, thank you. That's a really encouraging and beautiful way to think about it, which is new to me. So thank you for adding that. And thank you for coming here today and taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Yes, of course.
No problem. All of you out there listening, you can pick up Paul's new books, Python scripting for ArcGIS Pro and advanced Python scripting for ArcGIS Pro in the Esri merchandise store and on any online retailer that you'd like to visit. So thanks again, Paul. I appreciate it again, and
thank you.
Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see everyone at the virtual EC.
Great, looking forward to it.